somebody had asked for kind of an overview of what I have set up here. So I got 5 acres, and this is my fence. I went with a 4-strand high tensile smooth wire. They're all hot. I didn't go barbed wire because I would have probably needed electric anyway, and so this is what I went with. Plus, if I ever did get a horse, which is kind of doubtful, but you never know, or maybe I know someone and I would let them graze it here. I didn't want barbed wire with those animals, so I go down there to where that equipment is, and then I go out. See if it'll focus here. There's a corner post out there, and then along there, that's my duck blind. I got plenty of, it's low farmland here. It's pretty wet in the winter to the point where I can't graze. And I don't want to let the cows on here, because if I do, they're gonna just trash it. Was the year before last, I had them just in, so I have 2 fields. I have a north field here, and then it wraps around and goes all the way down the other side of the house. There is a south field, and so with those I have a gate system there, and I can flop the gates back and forth to let them graze in one field or the other. And then this is sort of a smaller inner corral area, and then the smallest corral there where I keep them in the winter. And I just throw some hog fuel down there. But you can see out there, see if I can zoom in, that it's heavy traffic and they just kind of wreck it. So there's my little outer corral. If you have drier area, you might be able to let them have that. It depends on what kind of grass grows throughout the winter, whether or not you want to leave them out there winter grazing. There's tons of information on that. I just can't do it because the ground here is too wet. So normally in the wintertime here, we're in kind of in the 40s, and it just rains a lot. So here is the south field. You can see this just pretty much all winter. That's just a big puddle. It's I don't know, it'll range from being about 2 or 3 inches deep to maybe, I don't know, there's probably parts of it there that are 6 to 8 inches deep, but it's just surface water and it just runs. The good thing is in the summertime it keeps the grass really green, but that all just kind of flows out, and there's a big ditch that catches it all out there, and it just kind of is wet all winter. There's backside of the barn, and kind of where I was standing to make that other one was out there past that corner. So this is the south field, and you're probably better off having a few fields that you can rotate them through. Rotational grazing is obviously it's a lot easier on your grass, but then you can let one field recover while you graze on the other field. And some people will even section off smaller sections, but then you got to be moving fences. And I don't want to move fences all the time, even if it's just temporary fencing. I would rather, so each field I will leave them on for, it's generally about a month. Seems to be kind of the rotation, and I'll let them graze it down over a month, and then I'll move them to the other field for a month, and then that way it's just back and forth. And in between, I will run a rotary mower over it to just knock the tops off. It keeps everything level. Plus, I don't like letting the grass go to seed, and if it does that, sometimes the cows won't go for it as much. So, all right. So then in the barn here, I got my ballast block on. and on the 3-point and the bale spears. So I was getting some hay down out of the loft there, but this is an L3301 with the R1 tires on it. And even with those tires with the ballast in it, it will handle a round bale, but barely. I don't like to lift too high, and I don't like to do a lot of turning and stuff like that. If I just got to move one a little bit, I'll do it without the ballast block. But if I need to do any kind of stacking or stuff like that, I put that block on. And then the hydraulics on this tractor are great, and they will handle that. If you want to safely handle a round bale, you probably want to go up to I don't know, like an MX series or something like that. This is a 33 horse tractor. Maybe get up into the mid 40s or something like that, and then you'll be pretty safe to handle a round bale without putting a ballast block or something like that on there. Yeah, I mean, it's just, you're asking for trouble if you think about it. Yeah, anyway, so coming into where I would keep the cows, I can close this gate, which normally it was, but I was in here cleaning the barn out. And that gives the cows essentially, what is that, about 12, 24, 36 feet of stall space. You can see them, that's the outside of in my little corral there. Anyway, yep, they pretty much muck that all up, but then it keeps them from destroying the rest of my fields and stuff like that. And then I just scrape that out, and I can either throw it in a manure spreader or heap it over the side and kind of help bolster that, and then throw some more hog fuel in there next year. But there's my system there. I got stalls here. This gate here will swing and it'll close off there, and then that gives the cows a big run in here. There's the interior here. This is where I have them stacked. So like I said, I was moving some bales. I can with that tractor, if I spear them low, I can get them stacked up 3 high, which is what I had. And so right now I'm going through just about a round bale per week on the 4 cows, and we'll get into some stocking rates here in a second. Okay, now let's talk some numbers. This is just rough numbers, and there's a lot of things that's not taken into account here. All right, so somebody asked me about my stocking rates on my 5 acres. During the summer, I can carry maybe 5 weaned calves, so those like 500 pounders, and my fields will keep up with that. I did 6 last year. I had 2 big ones and 4 weaned calves, these 4. If you watch some of my other videos, and it was, my fields couldn't keep up. They were overgrazing, so I had some issues there. So 4 is a good number for what I have, and I've got about 3.5 acres of grazable land, and so my rate that I can keep on my fields is about 1 cow per acre of grazing, maybe a little bit more because I don't make any of my own hay. But in this area, it's about 1 cow per acre. If you go some places, like you hear some of these folks in like Wyoming, where, I mean, you need hundreds of acres to support a cow. That's not the case here. But anyway, general rule of thumb, 1 cow per acre where I live. Wherever you live is gonna be different. So don't blow me up on that one. And then I feed hay for essentially, I plan on 6 months. If I can get away with less, that's great. We had a drier spring this year, and so I could get them on the fields earlier. But essentially, I plan for 6 months of feeding hay. And these are, these are all growing really well. I do feed them a little bit of grain, and we'll get into that over here. So for field rate, it's about 1 cow per acre, maybe a little more because I don't make hay. All right. So if I look over here, so how much hay do I need, right? Because I'm keeping them on hay for about 6 months, okay? So how I calculate that is the weight of the cow in pounds times 2 divided by 100 is the pounds of hay per day that you'll need. So for example, you got a 1,000-pound cow times 2 divided by 100 is about 20 pounds of hay per day. I use 1,000 pounds because it's a rough estimate. Sometimes some of them will eat a little more, some a little less, but this is how I calculate how much hay I'm going to need to buy. So if you look at a round bale that weighs 700 to 800 pounds, I think I figured average 750 for a round bale, and I need 6 months at 20 pounds a day, so I need 3,600 pounds or 5 bales per cow to get me through winter. I think this year I had about 5.5 bales per cow. We'll see. I might end up getting another weaned calf here soon, just so I space out my thing, but that's another story. So essentially, let's say 5 bales per cow will get me through my 6 months of winter. Let's talk about rate of gain. There's school of thought, easy math is 2 pounds a day is how much weight cow's gonna gain. But if you look at typically what happens is the rate of gain over here and then time. So when the cow starts out as a calf, it puts on weight really fast. As it gets older, it's not putting on as much weight per day. I've been keeping track of my purchase weights and my hanging weights, my finished weights of the cows. And I think I can guarantee a 1.7 rate of gain per day. So I'm using that more as a factor as far as like calculating how many days until I butcher them or how many days I keep them, right? Because usually you're going to get a cow at 500 pounds, a weaned calf, which is what I do. So if you're doing cow calf, these numbers aren't going to work for you, but I'm buying weaned calves and they're all generally going to be about 500 pounds. That's generally going to be about the 8-month-old mark. So that's what I'm getting. So let's say you want to take them to 11 or 1,200 pounds for your butchering weight, which seems to give you, again, this is all based on the size of cuts that people are used to seeing. Now you can get cows that are bigger. You're going to have huge steaks, all that stuff. They'll put weight on. You don't have to do this, but this is usually what I'm shooting for because your steaks and all that are going to come out the right size. So 11 to 1,200 pounds for the butcher weight. So that means they need to gain 700 pounds at 1.7 per day. That's 411 days from when I get them at 500 pounds to when they'll be ready to go. If I gain 2 pounds a day, that's going to give me 350 days. So kind of rule of thumb for me is somewhere between like a year to a year and a couple months. So what, 12 to 14 months from when I get it to when it's going to go to the butcher. Generally, I'm not going to want to keep them too much over a year because when we talk about keeping cows, buying hay and all that stuff, right? Like I need the numbers to be the same number of cows. So if I start butchering, I need to be able to buy another weaned calf to replace that. And if I buy the weaned calves before I butcher a cow, now all of a sudden I'm playing with my stocking rate for how much I can graze. So let's say I'm keeping a cow for longer, I put them back on the field. Now all of a sudden I buy 2 more weaned calves. Now I'm stocking at 6 cows and I'm gonna overgraze. So you just gotta take that into consideration. So let's talk money here. So let's say I buy a round bale at 50 bucks. I can get them a little cheaper sometimes, but you know, I'm going with numbers that are pretty safe. So round bale is $50. I need 5 bales, 5 round bales per cow. So that's $250 of hay. $250 of hay per cow. And let's say the cost of the cow, let's say I'm paying $1.50 a pound on the hoof. I'm going to pay about $750 for a weaned cow. Okay, so when we come over here and we talk about this, so you can buy them a little bigger, you pay a little more, and all of these prices fluctuate as far as the cost of the cow, cost of hay. You get a dry year, you're going to pay more for hay. You know, depending on what beef prices are going at and time of year, how many they got to get rid of. This $1.50, you could see that go lower, you could see it go a little higher. And that's all just paying attention to what's going on, or having a person that you know that you can get decent rates from. But if you figure on $1.50, that's gonna be close. It'll get you in the ballpark. Now, whether or not you want a grain finish, which I do, I do feed them a little grain. I like it. I like it the way the meat tastes when you do that versus straight grass fed, and that's a whole nother discussion. It would be a separate video. I'm not going to get into that right now. So I do like to give them a little grain. If you want to do a grain finish, this is my typical ration. Right now I'm getting 16 cents a pound for grain that has I think it's a 16% protein, and I'm at 16 cents a pound for that. It's pretty inexpensive. And then how I do it is, for the first 30 days I get 3 pounds a day, then 6 pounds a day for the next 30 days, then 9 pounds a day for the last 30 days to finish them out. So that's going to give me about $90 in grain cost to do a grain finish. So if I go over here and I say I pay $750 for the cow, I need $250 worth of hay, and let's say I'm going to put $100 of grain into them, and let's say I'm not paying myself any labor and I have no equipment costs, which is ridiculous. Let's say they don't break anything. I don't need any lumber. When you start adding stuff like this, and I didn't really know, I didn't know how people would want to calculate that, but if literally this is like cow, hay, grain, that's it. So your cost is going to be $1,100 into that cow from when you buy it, when you feed it over the winter, and when you grain finish it. And those are like approximate cost that I would see. So we'll move on over here and we'll talk about, so let's say I have 1,100 pound finish weight on my cow. A good rule of thumb is about 60% of your finish weight will be your hanging weight, which is, if you're selling beef, you're going to sell it on the hanging weight, not on the finish weight of the animal. The hanging weight is a lot different than your finished cuts. And I mean, just not to get too far into the weeds, but the rule of thumb I use is 60% of your finished weight is your hanging weight. And then when people want to know, well, how much, what's my weight of my cuts, you know, then I would say it's going to be 60% of your hanging weight will be what you end up with in finished cuts. Okay, and so moving down, right now I'm charging $3.60 a pound for hanging weight, right? So that 660 pounds of hanging weight I'm going to sell for $3.60 a pound, and that gives me $2,376 per cow, give or take. Okay, so if I go back over here and I take my $2,300 basically that I made from selling that beef, and I take my $1,100 out, I'm getting $1,200 per cow. Again, that's assuming we aren't spending anything on any labor or equipment, or we're not buying any materials to fix the barn, nothing like that. And when you start looking at how quickly that $1,200 goes when you have to do general maintenance. I mean, we could get into maintaining fences, because there's always going to be a few $100s every year in fence costs, and that's if you're, you know, I have a pretty good fence setup, and so my costs are low. I spend a few $100s every year in chemical sprays, stuff like that. Next year I'm going to have to end up probably spending a few $100s in fertilizer costs. One of my fields I need to do some work on to get it the right growth rate that I need to stock that many cows. So I'm going to be spending a little bit on fertilizer. And anyways, you can see that like $100 here, $100 there, you know, you have, let's say you have a tractor payment, you know, and so your equipment cost, let's say you're, you know, paying, you know, a few $100s on that, and anyways, and this is that $1,200, that's in a year, right? So that's $100 a month, and that's gross profit, and it goes pretty quick, right? So anyway, that's kind of how I do the math. And then a lot of times I'm going to keep part of a cow and I'll sell. So usually I'll keep a quarter and sell 3/4, and then that way, so that ends up taking that $2,300 down, you know, by a quarter. So now you're at 1,800 or so, and then now you're making $500, you know, a cow. So it doesn't take much to put a real dent in it. But again, this is just for a hobby, so I don't need to make a whole bunch of money, but I do want to be able to grow my own food, and then hopefully make enough off of that where I get my beef for no cost to me. But that's how I do that. You know, I could get into the different cuts and stuff like that, but that's going to give you a rough overview of sort of my thought process going into it.